How long have I been saying Miller Moss will be USC starting quarterback? Has something changed?
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube or wherever you want to download your podcast, this show is always free, and this show always appreciates your support. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5. Yeah. And you're going to get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. On Monday, Coach Lincoln Riley named Miller Moss USC's starting quarterback. Look, it's mock game week. It was time. Been telling you it was going to happen. If you're an everydayer of the show, you've known for a while that Miller Moss is going to be the starter. I've told you this. Despite what others out there have been trying to tell you, Jaden Ibotta was always fighting an uphill battle. It's just the way it was, being the transfer. Miller was way ahead of Jaden when it comes to the playbook. He should be. He's been around longer. And just to remind everybody, Jaden, he came over from UNLV as a true freshman. He threw for 3,085 yards, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and there's a lot of big upside with him when you see him. Big arm, big size. However, Miller, obviously, I think everyone would agree, probably did enough in the Holiday Bowl to, secure the spot. He definitely did enough to scare Will Howard over to Ohio State. Don't forget, Jaden Ibotta, he originally, when he jumped in the transfer portal, he was going to Georgia, and then he came to his senses. So now, after competing in the spring, throughout the summer, player-run practices, the first couple of weeks of fall camp, Miller Moss, the offensive line, the skill position guys, they can start developing that chemistry, getting ready for LSU, which, by the way, that game, if you're watching this episode today, it's 12 days away. This is why Coach Riley named Miller Moss the starting quarterback. It was that time. This is when the repetitions for the backups, especially at quarterback, they're going to shrink. That's why I said this is where Miller Moss, the wide receivers, the offensive line, the running backs, they start to get and become more cohesive. So how did we get here? How did Miller secure the starting quarterback job at USC? First of all, he hung out. He stuck with it. He's always wanted to be at USC. This was his dream school. He's one of those guys where you can actually say that. Go look at Miller Moss's timeline in real life. You'll see him wearing the Cardinal jersey, the Cardinal and gold jersey, going back to when he was a little wee young kid. He could have jumped in the transfer portal when Caleb Williams transferred to USC, but he didn't. He stayed the course. He waited until it was his turn. He earned the right. Something that Malachi Nelson wasn't willing to do. Remember, he was supposed to be the guy when Caleb Williams passed the baton, so to speak. Malachi Nelson, after spending all spring in Boise, he's now the backup quarterback. Interesting. Same day. It's Miller's time, right? I'm not supposed to root for players, but it's hard for me not to want to see Miller be really successful. And think about this. He missed his entire senior year of high school due to COVID. He had transferred to Mater Dei to be the starting quarterback, and then that got wiped out. So he showed up at USC. He used his true freshman year to redshirt. He then watched Keaton Slovis and then Jackson Dart play ahead of him. Jackson Dart is now at Ole Miss. Keaton Slovis, he is trying to make an NFL roster. Caleb showed up. Miller knew he wasn't going to play ahead of him. He went through the whole process of going through the competition, but he waited 2 more years, waited his turn. in his time at USC. So far, Miller has completed 66 passes. He's thrown the ball 92 times, total of 914 yards. And he has 9 touchdowns in his career. That's in 12 games of action. And that includes his bowl game starting the Holiday Bowl. In that bowl game start, he kind of blew up, right? What did he do? He had 6 touchdown passes. He was 23 for 33 throwing the ball, 372 yards. Not a bad first start, right? It was obvious after spring camp that Miller was ahead. Coach Riley, he kept the competition open. In fact, earlier in fall camp, this is what he said. Miller had the best spring, like I told you guys at the end of spring. There's no question if we were playing at that point that Miller, would have been the starter. In my history, man, a lot of changes, I mean, you got some other guys in the room, Jake Jensen. They've got reps. They've gotten better fast. We're excited to see those guys, excited to see what Jaden can do after now having an off season where he understands the offense and can grow. So my expectation is he's going to be quite a bit better than what he was. And the expectation is that Miller and Jake Jensen and the guys that have been there are going to continue to grow too. That's what Coach Riley was supposed to say. That's coach speak. Let everybody know, hey, the competition's open. Everyone knew Miller was going to be the guy. There shouldn't have been any doubt. And look, if you want to pick your starter based on who looks like they should be first off the bus, Jaden is your starter. He's 6'4", 215, 220 pounds. He looks like your prototypical NFL type of player. But if you're picking your starting quarterback based off of leadership, the ability to lead the team on and off the field, knowledge of the playbook, then Miller is going to be the starter. Plain and simple. That's why Coach Riley chose him. There's also one other thing to consider. Coach Riley has to trust you to be the starter. What he knows of Jaden Mayava is 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, as well as what he's seen so far through spring, through the summer, and fall camp. Remember, the media doesn't get to see a lot. We see a little bit, but once those doors are closed, once Goo Gate gets slammed shut, that's when the evaluations are really going on. When coach goes back and he looks at the film after practice. But I thought back to Big Ten Media Day back there in Indianapolis. And I asked Miller if he could pinpoint one thing in how this team is preparing this offseason compared to last season. He said something that really stood out. This is what Miller said. Beyond the obvious strength and weight training, it was creating a selfless and egoless team, and I think we've done a good job of internalizing that in the locker room. Miller Moss has some Matt Leinart level type of talent surrounding him at the skill positions, right? He understands that those guys can do all the heavy lifting. When you've got Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson and Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon and Kyron Hudson, Kyle Ford and Jaden Richardson, Jay Fair, I know I'm leaving off names. I'm just rattling them off. He knows those guys can do all the heavy lifting. Because Miller Moss also said this back in Indianapolis. I think the biggest thing for me is trying to be whoever this team needs me to be to put us in the best position to have success. We had certain shortcomings the year before, and I think those areas need to be addressed, and I try my best. But we also have a great supporting cast of leadership. I don't think that responsibility solely falls on my shoulders. I think, yes, I'm a big part of that, and I want to be a big part of that. But I think there's a general great supporting cast of leadership on this team that we can all rely on. So when you combine Miller Moss's football IQ that I just laid out for you, and the guys that he gets to put the ball into their hands that I just laid out for you, Combine that with Miller earning Coach Riley's trust, meaning I think Coach Riley understands that Miller's not going to turn the ball over. He's not going to put USC's new defense in a bad situation. Miller is the starter. Jaden is the future. And until Miller fails, Jaden's just going to have to be patient. He's going to have to wait another year. And you know what? If he doesn't play this year, he only gets to get into 4 games, get some mop-up duty, he can use this year to redshirt, just like Miller used a redshirt year. Trust me, everything usually works itself out. So, Miller's second start as a Trojan, it's going to be against LSU in Las Vegas. It's been settled. You know what else was settled? That game is sold out. It was also announced on Monday. The game is officially sold out. Whoa. 65,000 people are expected to be there. You got your ticket? I hope so. I'm going to be there. By the way, when I'm not over here on Locked on USC, I'm hanging out over there on wearesc.com. Inside the Trojan Huddle, we're going to be doing something Saturday, 10 o'clock at the Palms, same place the pep rally will be, which starts at 2 o'clock. I'll have more information for you on that. But like I said, Miller Moss is your starter. The game is sold out. Now it's just a matter of tying everything up, getting that offense more comfortable, knowing Miller's the starter at quarterback. The wide receivers can get that timing down. The running backs can work out, making sure they know where the ball's going to be handed off. The offensive line, they can get their timing down with the starting quarterback as well. Exciting times. 12 more days. Are you ready? It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season, which means you can stock up on all of your grilling favorites and you can earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. Now you won't have to choose between burgers and hot dogs. You can get both. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. And the average Ibotta user earns about $256 per year. That could cover the cost of the entire shopping trip for you. You're trying to save up for a flight? That might cover it. What about that fancy dinner you've been craving? Ibotta can help you get there. Other apps give you points that really don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw right to your bank account, your PayPal account, or gift cards. Simply add the offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. And did you know you can save on over 2,400 different brands and shop at over 1,000 different retailers, including your favorite grocery stores? It's time you joined the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering Locked on USC listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's I-B like boy, O-T-T-A in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. It's back. College football is back, and Locked on College Football, the podcast, is kicking off their action with a live season preview at 7 p.m. Eastern on August 20th on the Locked on College 24/7 streaming YouTube channel. If you're watching this show today, today's the 20th. This 4-part series will cover each of the 4 major conferences with discussion on which ACC, which Big 10, which Big 12, and which SEC teams have a shot at the expanded college football playoffs. Be sure to check out the special streaming on Locked on College Football's 24/7 YouTube channel or on Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I think it was last Tuesday or last Wednesday's episode of Locked on USC. Go check it out. My everydayers, remind me, which one was it? I rolled out my first starting lineup assignments. Here's a piece of that show, a portion of that show, specifically about defense. I said Jamil Muhammad, Bear Alexander, Nate Clifton, Braylon Shelby could be your starting front line. Or it could be Anthony Lucas, it could be Bear, It could be Clifton. It could be Jamil Muhammad. That could be the starting front four. At linebacker, I said it could be Easton Mascarenas-Arnold and Mason Cobb, or it could be Easton Mascarenas-Arnold and Eric Gentry. I think I predicted Anthony Beavers or Zion Branch at nickel or Greedy Vance at nickel. I definitely said I got Achille Arnold and Kamari Ramsey starting at safety. At cornerback, this is where I got interesting. DeCarlos Nicholson and Jacoby Covington. Or the transfer John Humphrey and Jalen Smith at cornerback. Remember that? I remind everybody because I was told a couple weeks ago that Jalen Smith is working out at cornerback this year. He's not even playing the nickel. He can play all 5 spots, but they really focused in Jalen's strength is at cornerback. Well, you want some confirmation? Bruce Feldman, he posted a message on X that he heard the following. Mind you, this is right after the scrimmage that I have a gag order on not to talk about. Mind you, Bruce Feldman heard that Anthony Lucas is starting to come on. He's been real disruptive. He's heard that Easton Mascarenas-Arnold has been as advertised. And here's the best one. Jalen Smith, probably the best cornerback. Now, I have no problem with those first 2 observations, even though Bruce hasn't been to a practice. Not in my presence. I've been to every practice. It's that part about Jalen Smith, that note. I found that really intriguing. The media has been asked not to comment on who is lining up at specific positions. Unless Coach Riley or one of the position coaches specifically mentions it, we're not supposed to. Same thing and we apply that to injuries as well. So who leaked this info to Bruce? I'm not mad. I'm interested. Who leaked the info to Bruce that Jalen's been USC's best cornerback this fall? I'm not saying it's not true, but since the cat is out of the bag, I'm going to tell you, Jalen looked great in Saturday's scrimmage. He was locking dudes up. Absolutely. Sometimes you can tell who's doing well based on USC's social media accounts, based on the highlights they'll put out there. That might be a clue. Maybe that's where Bruce got his information. Hustle. He's been doing this for a while. He's got his sources. He's pretty good at what he does. But I'll tell you this, I've been telling my everydayers, USC's secondary has been pretty damn good. It's deep. Jalen Smith, in his time at USC, he's played safety, he's played nickel. I think USC's new secondary coach, Doug Belk, he found Jalen's sweet spot. I mean, literally, raise your hand if you had Smith starting at cornerback this year, considering the transfers that came in. I've been a big proponent of DeCarlos Nicholson and John Humphrey. I said, you don't leave a starting job to jump in the transfer portal to sit on the bench. Jalen Smith is saying, hold my pencil, Mark. So, look, I had DeCarlos Nicholson and Humphrey starting with Covington. One of those 2 starting with Jacoby, or Jacoby starting with one of those 2. Well, now it seems like among those 3, you got to find cornerback 3 because it might sound like Jalen is starting a cornerback. I don't think it really matters, to be honest with you. Coach Belk has said that he wants to play 8 to 10 defensive backs every game in the rotation. He wasn't talking about getting these guys some playing time on special teams. No. He's specifically talking about 8 to 10 of his defensive backs being part of every game's rotation. It's a pretty high bar to start. It's a pretty high bar to set. But hey, he knows his personnel better than I do. So in the rundown, I said, surprise starter. Jalen Smith sounds like he could be one of them. But besides Jalen, Who else could be a surprise starter on defense? Who would you think? Would Gavin Meyer, would Kobe Pepe, would they be considered surprise starters? I mean, Gavin Meyer was one of the last guys to join the roster out of the transfer portal. And by all indications, and I told you about it on this show, the coaching staff wants everybody in that defensive line room, especially the freshmen, to watch how Gavin does things on the field, off the field. They want them to emulate how he approaches the game. So if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, they want those freshmen to imitate everything Gavin Meyer does. It puts a lot of responsibility and accountability on the transfer. That's the type of responsibility you want, though. When your coaches are pointing you out like that, that's when you want the coaches pointing a finger at you. Remember, when you point your finger, there's three more pointing right back at you. The coaches have confidence when they're pointing that type of finger. You know how I feel about Kobe Pepe. I think he's going to be I don't know if he's going to be a starter. He's going to be part of the rotation. That's without a doubt. So, Jalen Smith, that's one pleasant surprise that's coming out of fall camp. I'll see what else I could talk about and let you know. The farther we get away from that scrimmage, the more information I'll be able to kind of go, oh, by the way, I remember this one time at practice, or anyways, gag orders still in effect. Haven't broken any rules yet. Coming up in the next segment, you see that behind me, that honk if UCLA sucks license plate frame? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's happened to the USC-UCLA rivalry. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers, you can bet $5 and you can get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit fanduel.com/locked-on to download America's #1 sports book. What's missing from the USC-UCLA rivalry? Is there anything missing? I mean, do me a favor, honk. How come this game feels like it's lost its luster? Or is it just me? If we're being honest, when it comes to rivalries and the hate type of rivalries, USC versus UCLA, it doesn't compare to Alabama versus Auburn, the Iron Bowl. It just doesn't. It doesn't compare to the Civil War. Hey, look, when you're calling it the Civil War, there's some hate involved. The Red River Shootout, Texas, Oklahoma, doesn't even come close to Michigan, Ohio State. Don't get me started. In my opinion, it's always going to be in second place behind USC versus Notre Dame. But what happened to the hate? What happened to the animosity, that visceral feeling you would get UCLA week, where every day you just had that taste in your mouth? Like, UCLA. What? Where is that Cade McNown wearing the villain hat with pride moment? Where is that? Who is that on UCLA? I mean, I'll be honest. I miss the Matt Barkley to Damian Williams for a meaningless type of touchdown, because Coach Neuheisel decided he's going to use a meaningless timeout late in the end of the game. We need more of that. Now, is it a coincidence that Rick Neuheisel played at UCLA and then coached at UCLA? keep that footnote going for a second here. Because Rick Neuheisel, he bled paisley blue, baby blue, powder blue. He had his own passion bucket. As much as I'm not a UCLA fan, I respect people who are fans of their team, who have a passion for their team. Coach Neuheisel, he had a passion for being a Bruin. His son is still a coach at UCLA. That family bleeds powder blue. And I guess we'll call it gold. It's a weird color, but yeah, we'll call it powder blue and gold. We'll be nice today. But look, as much as 13-9, remember that game? Remember how much that sucked donkey? Those types of games are necessary to keep the hate fires roaring, to keep those embers going. You need them. I mean, we were talking about this today on Inside the Trojan Huddle, the panel show that I do over there at wearc.com, which will be published this week. Make sure you check it out. So as much as I loved 27-0, 50-0, 66-19, if you're a USC fan, you know exactly which games I'm referring to. And as much as I hated the losing streak, I actually looked forward to that game with some real animosity. But it's been missing for a while. It really has. Some of it's USC's fault. Most of it's UCLA's fault. They've sucked for way too long. I mean, they don't even think about this. USC, UCLA, they don't even get into recruiting battles anymore. And that's a whole nother issue for a whole nother show. I might table that for another discussion. In fact, I will. But let me tell you how much things have changed. Why in the hell are guys transferring between schools? First, you had Jay Toya going from USC to UCLA. He stuck around. You had Kyle Ford, USC to UCLA, back to USC. I mean, that dynamic, that's just weird. That was never happening in the past. That was never even a consideration. I mean, has this rivalry really just deteriorated into just another game? What's it going to take for this game to have some of that real hate backing it up? Remember, I talked about Coach Neuheisel. He played at UCLA. He bleeds it. Well, guess what? UCLA's new head coach, Deshaun Foster, he was at UCLA during that losing streak for USC. He was there when Bob Toledo had the Bruins at the top of the college football world. Think about it. What happens to UCLA's football program if that game against Miami doesn't get moved because of the hurricane? That game got moved to the end of the season. UCLA had some internal locker room issues going on, which, by the way, has kind of led to where we are in today's era of college football. Remember the black armbands? Look it up. I don't have time to do it on the show right now. But Deshaun Foster was around then. Is he going to be the guy to remind his team that they're supposed to hate USC? That they are supposed to make USC's lives miserable? Will he be the guy to say something to get the two colors fighting when USC gets to the Rose Bowl later this year? Remember, Deshaun Foster had a rough time at the big conference media day. He was at a loss for words. I think that's a really nice way of putting it. I don't think he's going to be at a loss for words when he needs to get his team fired up for USC versus UCLA rivalry week. I'm looking forward to it this year. I look forward to it every year. But now that I've been thinking about it, thinking back to, Coach Foster, he might have some stories in his bag that he might renew the rivalry, renew the visceral hate, those feelings. Am I wrong, Trojan fans? Hit me up in the comments section. You know where to find me. When you're done making Locked On USC your first listen every day, don't forget college football, Locked On College Football, Spencer McLaughlin. He'll get you through there. This Saturday, we got games coming up. So when you're done making Locked On USC your first listen, get on over there to weareusc.com. We've got so much content for you over there. Check it out. You're not going to be sorry. We're going to, between Locked On USC, between my written content over there at weareusc.com, you're going to be ready for USC versus LSU 12 days away in Las Vegas. The game sold out. If you don't have tickets, hey, Game Time might be able to help you out. So until that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.